Why, hello there, everyone. I just finished watching Gundam The Witch from Mercury episode 10, and I think I remember reading somewhere that episode 10 is going to be the last of the episodes we get for a while, because I think there's going to be a break in between now and the 11th episode. And if that is true, then it would check out, because not only did this episode have a lot of setup for things to come, but also it had an after credit scene, and so the after credit scene would be explained knowing that this is going to be the last episode in a part. Not necessarily a season, but I'm just calling it a part, right? But there was an after credit scene, so if you missed it, you should go back and watch that, and then come back to this video and hear my thoughts, because I will be talking about the after credit scene as well. But anyways, the episode starts out with the head of House Grassley and House Jeddirk, if I'm remembering the names correctly. It's Gyul's father and Shaddiq's adoptive father, planning on assassinating Delling, once again trying to resuscitate that plan to kill Delling, but I guess this time they're actually going to do it. And then it cuts to Suletta with the rest of Mio's company. However, Mio isn't there because she's off doing business stuff. And so they have to test out this prosthetic leg thing, and I just want to shout out the animation here, because for some reason the animation was just strangely good during this whole prosthetic leg test, and it was so funny seeing Suletta squatting on top of that thing, because how do you test prosthetic legs when you already have legs? I guess you just kind of have to squat down in order to sort of simulate using the prosthetic legs, but I would have been scared if I were Suletta in that situation, because she's high up on that thing and she's having to test out these prosthetic legs, not knowing if they're going to randomly trip or malfunction or just stop working or something like that, going through this obstacle course. So if it were to trip and she fell from the top of that, that would probably hurt a little bit, but she was wearing a hard hat after all, so I guess they were taking precautions for that. And then at the end of that scene, they were asking her if she had secured a place for the filming of said prosthetic legs, and she forgot, which led to this funny wordplay. So I think what she literally said was something like Suletta Wasureta, and I don't know what that means, so if anybody has enough knowledge of Japanese, if anybody's Japanese is good enough, please enlighten us on the actual wordplay, because they translated it as Suletta Forgetta. So I think the point got across, but I'm still suspecting that the sheer extent of that wordplay probably was lost on the English translation, right? Because it's so difficult and tricky to translate wordplay from one language to another, because a lot of times it relies on the actual native language it's being spoken in. So if anybody has some extra insight on that, please let us know in the comments, because even without the full context, I thought that was pretty funny. I'm curious how other languages translated that. And then, side note, this sounds really random, the order at which I'm going through these points, but I literally wrote down these notes chronologically as they were happening in the episode. So even though they might seem random, they are in fact in chronological order. But the side note is that I finally noticed the way Gyul's brother twirls his hair is just like how Garma Zabi twirls his hair. That has to be a reference, right? He's been twirling his hair like that this whole time in the show, and obviously I've noticed it this whole time, but I've never actually consciously made the connection. That is just like Garma Zabi, which is hilarious. And then after that, more importantly, definitely more importantly to the plot, is that Shaddiq contacts some Earthians. So the biggest reveal in this episode is that we finally got to see, we got a little glimpse of what's going on down on Earth. And it looked as if these people were hanging out in some kind of abandoned school or something, but there was vegetation overgrown everywhere, as if they were in some kind of ghost town that was abandoned, right? And they don't mention it yet, but these people belong to some faction called the Dawn of Fold, and Shaddiq contacts them directly, which they make a point about, because they say that typically Shaddiq would use a middleman, right? But Shaddiq says the reason why he's talking to them directly is to communicate how important this is, and Shaddiq is basically using them as henchmen to help with the assassination of Delling. And Also, one of these people that he's talking to, they were watching the Gundam Aerial promo video that Suletta made, and they were watching it on what looked like a PS Vita. So, shout out to the PS Vita. I'm sure all the PS Vita players are going to appreciate that. I have a mutual streamer, Future Churro, who's a big supporter of the Vita, so I need to tell him about this. But anyways, they make it a point that Suletta is basically making a mockery of the Gundam, right? And it makes a lot more sense why they're saying this now, because later in the after credit scene, it looks as if those two girls each had a Gundam. I'm just guessing they're both Gundams because of the face, and also how much attention or how much importance they were seeming to put on the Suletta video. But I'm pretty sure those are Gundams, right? And so after Shadiq talks to these people and then leaves the room, he thanks Nika for setting this up. So I think that implies that Nika is typically the middleman he uses, right? But even if not, at the very least, Nika is a henchman of Shadiq, more or less, and at least has some involvement in the assassination of Delling. And then another little side note that maybe isn't so important to the plot, but maybe is important to some people on Twitter, is that Cecilia finally stands up. Pause for the applause. And I don't think I've ever mentioned this character by name at all in any of these video or in any of these episode reviews, because all she's been doing is just sitting around and doing nothing. But she still somehow got a pretty big following on Twitter despite that. And so I'm sure her standing up in this episode made a lot of people happy. So I had to mention that we can finally stop waiting on her to stand up. And then that leads to what is pretty much the climax of the episode. This episode doesn't have much action in it, obviously. Maybe some would argue that the after credit scene was the actual climax, but really the climax of this episode was Mio coming back and Suletta meeting up with her, and Suletta sort of being disillusioned with the greeting that Mio gave her, because throughout this episode, there were things sort of foreshadowing to Suletta that Mio is at least seemingly passing her up, metaphorically speaking, right? Like Suletta is being left behind in a manner of speaking, because Mio is out there pursuing these ambitions and she's busy, right? And it's funny because they were basically implying that Suletta was turning into a stay-at-home mom while Mio was out there bringing home the bacon, right? To which Suletta had to retort, "No, I'm not the wife, I'm the groom." And then later, Elan, well, the real Elan, but to Suletta, it would be the fake Elan. He is on the hunt for that aerial because House Pale is once again trying to have him go get the aerial. And so to do that, he has to get close to Suletta. And to get close to Suletta, he has to sort of pry her away from Mio at least a little bit. And his method of doing that is to tell her how she's basically just being used by Mio and how they're not actually engaged, right? So throughout the episode, you have these things making Suletta reevaluate their relationship to an extent. And it came to a head when she finally met up with Mio and, like I said, was sort of disillusioned because she was maybe expecting a bit more of a greeting. And then also, I think Suletta, obviously she was very happy about being trusted with the caretaking of the garden, only to feel as if she was maybe being a little bit betrayed when she learned that Mio was hiring those other gardeners, right? Maybe not betrayed, but obviously Suletta maybe thinks more about Mio, or I think actually Mio cares about Suletta just as much. But from Suletta's perspective, with how busy Mio has been and with how unemotional she seems, from Suletta's perspective, it probably seems as if Mio cares about Suletta less than how much Suletta cares about Mio, right? And it honestly makes it feel like Berserk. It's funny because on the last episode, their relationship, their dynamic was reminding me of Orga and Mikazuki. But by this episode, by the end of this episode, I honestly was seeing the similarities between their relationship and Guts and Griffith, specifically right before Guts leaves the Band of the Hawk, because the relationship is so similar, or at least Guts' perception of the relationship is so similar to Suletta's perception right now, because Guts thought so highly of Griffith, right? And then he started to learn that Griffith didn't think as much of him, and he saw how everyone admired Griffith and how Griffith had all of these ambitions and he had this goal, and Guts didn't really have any kind of grand ambitions like that, right? And so he felt as if he was just being drug along by this guy, and the only way he would actually get respect from Griffith is if he were to leave and go do things on his own, right? And it honestly makes it seem as if Suletta is going to do the same thing, right? Suletta isn't really getting the expected respect that she would like to get. The amount of respect that she would expect, right? With the amount of work she thinks she's putting into the dynamic between them. So I would not be too surprised if Suletta leaves and goes her own way after this. Unlike Guts, though, I don't think they're actually going to become, or unlike Berserk, I don't think they're actually going to become enemies or anything like that. But I'm thinking she might leave like Guts, but then eventually come back and meet up. And I think Suletta leaving would actually be good for Mio, because I think it would force Mio to appreciate her a bit more if Mio has sort of lost sight of how useful and helpful someone like Suletta is, right? And of course, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I talk about the after credit scene, tragically, she dropped those keychains that was supposed to be symbolic of her relationship with Mio degrading to an extent at that moment. She dropped those keychains, one of which she was wanting to give to Mio, and I thought it was funny because those keychains, I loved how abstract they looked. They looked like little parkas. They looked like people wearing parkas, right? But the face, like they had eyes on the parka itself, so they were like these weird parka creatures that was never explained. So I actually thought the design was funny. She showed them to Nika earlier on when they were doing the prosthetic leg test. And I honestly thought that she was going to give one to Nika because one was red and one was blue. And she was telling Nika about how she's always wanted to have a matching accessory with someone, right? Even though these aren't matching, they're more like counterparts, but you get the idea. And since Suletta's hair is red and Nika's hair is blue, at least the underside, I thought that Suletta was going to keep the red one and she was going to give the blue one to Nika. But no, lo and behold, she actually was planning on giving it to Mio, probably more expectedly to most people, but in that moment, since she was telling Nika, I thought she would give it to Nika. Nika's reaction to that was really strange too. I didn't really understand that. I might want to go back and rewatch that to see if I can infer anything there. But she dropped the keychains on the floor into that garden, and then before we get to the after credit scene, I can't believe I forgot to talk about the mysterious new character, Bob, who is wearing a hard hat, which explains all of the Bob the Builder memes on Twitter. I haven't seen any spoilers about this show, but I kept on seeing people talk about Bob the Builder in relation to this show, and I kept on thinking, how in the world is that going to be related, right? It kind of was a spoiler, but it's one of those spoilers that isn't a spoiler unless you have context, in which case you're safe. So yes, we have a mysterious new character named Bob, who likely has zero plot importance at all, right? And we just have to see what he's going to do. We know it can't be Gule Jeddirk, right? Because Gule Jeddirk was sent away. I didn't mention Gule Jeddirk in the last episode, but his father was essentially sending him away because his father has lost all trust in him actually winning any kind of duel. So big hopes for the new character, Bob. Can't wait to see what he does. He is in the ship that gets put up at gunpoint. So I'm segueing into the after credit scene here. So this is where they actually reveal the name of that Earthian faction, and they call it the Dawn of Fold. And Bob, our beloved Bob the Builder, is in that ship. And I don't know, I just have a funny feeling that Bob might know how to pilot a mobile suit, so maybe he could help them get out of that situation. But that was definitely quite the cliffhanger right before the attempted assassination of Delling, so I'm actually really excited. I really liked that episode, and I'm really excited for episode 11. But if there really is a break in between now and then, we just have to wait, but that gives us plenty of time to speculate. So please hit us up with the speculation in the comments. And as always, let me know if I missed anything or misunderstood anything, or if there is anything else you want to say about the episode. So with all that said, thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you guys later. So bye for now.